Saturday, I was in my room trying to do my homework, and the Holy Spirit was calling so loudly that I couldn't focus on what it was that I was trying to read. I couldn't compute the numbers. I couldn't put the fractions together. So I got aggravated, and I got in my truck, and I took off driving and went up to Lake Lanier. And I got out of my truck, and I slammed the door shut, and I ran down to the water side, and I stood on a rock, and I looked up at heaven, and I cried out to God and said, "What is it that you want from me, God? What do you want?" He said, "I want your service." And I said, "I want life." So I turned my back on God and got back in my truck and drove back home. That night, when I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I continued to fight and wrestle with God over this calling. And it was about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I got up out of bed and I walked to the kitchen. And in our kitchen, there's a back door with the glass panes on it. And as I passed by that door, I saw my reflection in the darkness behind it. And I saw a man that was void of love, void of passion, void of life. And I turned around and walked back to my bedroom, and as I approached the bed, it was almost like a force just grabbed my legs and swooped them out from under me. And I fell to my knees, and I cried out again, "God, what is it that you want?" He said, "I want your service." So I surrendered that night to the service of God. And for once in my life, I was at peace.
Idea.
That no matter what happened after that day, everything was going to be okay. And that if my life were to end that night, it would be okay because I have an eternal reward, an eternal promise in heaven beyond this life. When I got to church the next day, and that Baptist preacher was up there preaching up a storm, and at the end he gave an altar call, and I walked down, and this was at one of the mega churches. There was probably 700 people in attendance, and I come walking down to the altar, and he come down and he met me, and he said, "You're the one who has been running from God." I said, "Yeah, I am." So he gave me a job at the church. My first job in ministry was the greatest I ever had. I told people I would never change it unless God wanted me to go somewhere else. I became the janitor of North Metro First Baptist Church. It was my job to clean God's home and keep His toilets clean, and I took pride in that each and every day because God gave me a mission. He gave me purpose in life, and it was to the service to Him. But one day when I was out there working, the girl that I was dating at the time of my accident, the girl that I had put so much distance between me and her name came back to me. But it didn't come back to my mind, it came back to my heart. And I fought it at first. I said, "No, I'm not going to have anything to do with this person." I said, "I have control over my mind, I've got control over my thought, and in the power of Christ, I've got the authority to push that person out." And that's what I did for about a week. But then I realized that it wasn't my head, it wasn't an emotional thing that I was feeling toward the girl. It was the Holy Spirit calling upon me to pray for this girl. But this girl was just as bad as I was. But I started praying. I would pray during the daytime, and I would take time at lunchtime to pray, and at night before I went to bed, I would pray for her. But as time went on, my prayers became more and more intense and time-consuming. It got to the point that I was praying for this girl pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In my sleep, I would wake up praying for this person. And I became concerned, so I went to one of the pastors and said, "Tell me about prayer. Does God answer prayer?" And he said, "Yeah, God answers prayer. Yes, no, or maybe." He said, well, what's going on? And I told him. And I explained to him the lifestyle that this girl lived. And an experienced, educated man of God tells me that at her age, she's too far gone. There's no hope for her. She's already made her bed. She's going to have to lie in it. But I couldn't take in what he said. I had to keep going with what the Holy Spirit was telling me. So one day, God talked to me and he said, I want you to write this girl a letter. I want you to tell her everything you know about her life. And then I want you to tell her about my son, Jesus Christ. Yes. And I did. I sat down and I wrote out this letter to her. And to be honest with you, if I had received this letter about myself, I would have been highly offended for somebody pointing out my iniquities. And I didn't expect to hear back from this girl, but about a week later I get a postcard from her that says, you know what? You're right, and I need to speak with someone. So I got the ladies director from the church to go over and have lunch with her one day, and she came back and she told me, Tommy, I've never in my life seen any person so tormented. I have never in my life heard the Holy Spirit crying out somebody's name to come into salvation like I have this person. She said, I've been doing this for 20 years, never seen this. But other people kept telling me to give up on it, to stop praying for her. Go on and live your life, but I couldn't do it, and I continued to pray for her. And one particular Sunday, she comes walking into the church and sits down beside me. The Reverend Frank Cox, he was in the middle of preaching a series of sermons already at the time, and when it got time for him to come up and preach, he said, I don't know why, but I've got to stop preaching on this and go back to preaching on the exchange life. And for 4 weeks, that man preached this girl's life from the very beginning to where she was at that day. And she never would make that walk down the aisle. She never would cry out to Jesus. But one Friday, a few weeks later, after that last message, she was on the way to Orlando, Florida, to see her children that she hadn't seen in a while. And she called me up on the phone, and she was crying. She was upset. She said, Tommy, I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know what's going on, but I got a feeling there's something bad is going to happen this weekend. And I said, Terry, all you got to do is give it to God. And about that time, a voice came over that telephone line that said, leave the girl alone. She belongs to me. And then the phone disconnected. And that entire weekend, she tried to call me. But one of the points that I couldn't get her to see in the time that we were talking was, you can't call on me because I don't have the power to forgive sin. You can't call on me because I don't have the power to handle your spiritual issues. You got to call on Jesus. Yes. And throughout that weekend, she kept trying to call me. And every time she would call, she would be hanging up the phone as I was picking it up. Isn't it wonderful how God puts our timing with His to carry out His plan? And at Disney World, of all places, this girl fell to her knees and cried out to Jesus. She came back so changed, so transformed, that her mother didn't even recognize her. I went down to the doctor's office where she worked one day, and the doctor she worked for came out and said, Tommy, I don't know what you've done to her, but she's been transformed into something that I don't know. And I looked at the doctor, who was not a Christian, and said, you don't get it. It wasn't me. It's the transforming power of Jesus Christ that had a work in her life. Because when we receive Christ, we can count on the words to be true, that all things old have passed away, and behold, all things new. She entered into the Holy of Holies through Jesus Christ. She walked into the throne room of God. She knelt at the throne of God and said, Father, forgive me and give me life. And that's exactly what He gave to her. God still works miracles today. Prayer is still alive today. Yes. Jesus Christ is still alive today. Yes. So what does that have to do with me and finding purpose and meaning? It changed my direction in life. It changed my insight and the way I view life. Instead of seeking worldly pleasures, I seek ways to serve God. Now, my time in service didn't end with Terry's conversion. There was a time of formation after that.